Hello friends. For today's video, I wanted to go through a list of books that I'm hoping to get around to in the month of February. Despite the fact that February is a shorter month, I have way too many books. Way too many books on my TBR for this month, but there's a reason for this. A lot of you know I love to write, and my second book has been completed as far as on my end since last year. Actually, since 2023. I finished it in 2023, and then it took a long time for the editor to work on it because they're a freelance editor and they have a family, and there's just a lot of things that go into being self-employed. So they had it for a lot of the year, and then the formatter has also had it for quite a long time, as this is the first time that the formatter has done a full-length novel, and they ended up having this first time be for a very long full-length novel. So it's been sort of out of my hands for quite a while. But with the formatter, there's been a lot of, I go through it and I double check things, and then I let them know, hey, there's this here, and it's been something that's kind of continued to be a process. But it would seem that that process is basically completed now. And as a result, because a little behind the scenes, I have basically worked every single weekend for months now. So I think that I am going to officially have more time, and I want to spend more of that time reading, and I want to really push myself to consume all the stories that I can within the month of February. I did want to give that little heads up though, just because I know people have asked for updates. I do try to update fairly regularly over on Patreon, as I prefer leaving some of that stuff out of my channel, just because I prefer my channel be dedicated to other people's works, but I at the same time want to ensure that people at least have a heads up for those that want that information. The tentative release date, fun little detail, will be March 18th, which would make it exactly 6 years since the first book came out on the day. That is my hope, that it can officially be out. But I might have the ebook available early for patrons, so if you are interested, you can be on the lookout for that. And then the audiobook, it might take some time for that to be done, but I hope for it to be done relatively close to when the release of the ebook and potentially physical copies are available. More on that to come. I just wanted to give a heads up as to why this is going to be so outlandish, the amount of books on this TBR. But let's jump into the TBR officially. First up, kind of out of left field, would be He Who Drowned the World. I have been meaning to get around to the second book in this duology ever since it came out. And other things just kind of kept coming in. Library holds would come in, an audiobook hold would come in, and I just kept pushing it aside. And I have been hoping to pick it up, and then something that sort of sparked that, okay, I'm officially going to pick this up, is that one of my friends, Sarah, who has her own channel, I'll have her linked, she often pops up in collab videos for my anime, manga, video games channel, as well as my collaborative channel, World Hoppers, where the AdSense goes to charity. Sarah pops up in a lot of those, so we have a lot of overlapping tastes. And she just recently picked up the first book, She Who Became the Sun, and I told her, hey, if you are willing to maybe pick up the second one in February, maybe we can buddy read it, and she was totally on board. So I am very much looking forward to visiting this world again. I remember that the first book had an interesting way of presenting the characters and the plot lines to you, and that initially you start out having what feels like your main character, and then all of a sudden, part of the way through, you then have it be a cast of characters as the perspectives, or at the very least you get more than just the main character, and it opens up. And a lot of other books sort of either slowly bring you in with all these different characters, or maybe there is a main character and they maintain that main character status, but then as the story progresses, you'll occasionally get another perspective here and there, and things open up. So for this one to just have this turn all of a sudden was very unexpected, but I also felt like, okay, now I gotta really be on my feet, and I gotta figure out why this person seems to have an issue with this person, and what's this person's relationship with this person, and the intrigue was very well done. I just, in general, really quite enjoyed that first book, and I need to get around to that second one, so that's why it's one of the higher priority things. Not that I'm going in order of priority, but it is quite high priority. And then a lot of the books that are going to be on the TBR for February are ones that are part of the A Fantasy Fan Reads Steampunk. I just mentioned in a You Choose video a lot of the books that I'm planning to read for that. And a lot of the books I'm planning to read are over the course of the first quarter of this year. But I do want to get around to quite a few of them in February, and then the rest I'll check out in March. One of them would be Perdido Street Station. this is a sci fantasy, or at the very least, I always would have thought of it as sci fantasy from everything I've heard and been told about it. But it would seem it is also maybe fitting in the steampunk category, as several different people recommended this one for that reading vlog that I'm going to be working on. I can't wait. I've been also, like He Who Drowned the World, I have been meaning to get around to Perdido Street Station for quite a while. I've not actually read any China Miéville. I was meant to read this really short one as a buddy read with my husband, and then he read it and he didn't really like it, and he's like, don't bother. I still plan to read the book, but I haven't had the chance just yet, and Sean didn't really care one way or the other if I ended up picking up that other one. So with this one, though, he does love Perdido Street Station, and I really want to read it, especially for his sake, but also I've heard it's quite good. We also have A Winter's Promise. It's interesting. This is one where, if I'm not mistaken, the author never intended to write it as a steampunk. It just happened to have those elements in its world building, and it was kind of retroactively where the author was able to be like, oh yeah, I guess you're right, because people I believe have asked, and they're like, yeah, I guess it is steampunk, but it wasn't really it was more of just like an organic, it just came about through its world building and their imagination. And now that we, I think, are categorizing things more frequently, that it's kind of been, interestingly, a staple almost in steampunk. The covers are beautiful. I see these all the time at my local bookstores, and I've always been curious. So when I saw it pop up a bunch, I was like, okay, this would be a great time to get around to it. The Infernal Devices. I don't need to say a whole lot here. It's Cassandra Clare. It got recommended. I've heard good things, but I'm also unsure. I'll touch on some other things that are for buddy reads, but I want to get around to some anticipated releases that I plan to get to. One of them would be Green Teeth. This is one that has been compared to T. Kingfisher, which a lot of you know I'm a huge T. Kingfisher fan. And I especially think that this seems like a comp title that is actually accurate, because a lot of us know sometimes they just throw whatever and see what sticks. And this is an instance where I'm like, oh, I see. If you had told me this was T. Kingfisher from the synopsis, I would have believed you, because it seems like it is a combination of cozy and grim fairy tale. And that, to me, when it comes to T. Kingfisher's fantasy at least, I'm like, yeah, that's to a T. Exactly what I would expect from a T. Kingfisher book. So I think the comp is going to be accurate. However, that said, I don't anticipate that it's going to just feel like a copy. I fully expect it to feel like it's in that same realm of, if you like this, try that. But otherwise, it will still stand as unique and have its own unique authorial voice. I'm really looking forward to it, because I think T. Kingfisher is such a fun addition to so many of the genres that she writes within, because she's able to combine so many different features that we appreciate from different genres. And so I look forward to seeing if there is another author that's emerging with that skill. I really am going to enjoy that, I think, quite a lot. I don't have any specific contemporary romance books just yet. And once again, kind of revisiting the video I mentioned a second ago that I did, the You Choose video, I'm going to look through your recommendations and see what you point out. I've already read an Abby Jimenez book, so I'm planning to read a few other contemporary romances for sometime around Valentine's Day, just to get some other things mixed in with all the fantasy. I also am really looking forward, I think I'm finally officially going to get around to The Doll Makers. This was a new release from 2024. We're in 2025 now. But this was a new release last year, and I was sent a copy of it very, very kindly, and I just kept having something similar that I described with He Who Drowned the World. I just kept having other library holds come in, and I try to get around to library holds because there is a limited amount of time, but that then means that the physical copies I have been very kindly sent end up getting pushed back behind the library holds, and I need to remedy that, and I need to have a better system, I feel, for balancing things that are sent to me and things from the library. But regardless, it sounds incredible. My friend Ingrid really likes it, and I'm actually going to be seeing this friend of mine soon, because they actually live in a different state than me, and so I want to read it so that we can discuss it when we hang out. I think that'll be a lot of fun. It sounds like it's really cool magic and world building that sort of has this puppet element to it. It sounds really quite cool. I'm also going to be reading Dragon Mage and A River Enchanted and An Accident of Stars, all part of a video where I am reading things that people have recommended to me, which would be, in this instance, my friend Deshauna, my friend Roger, who have their own channels. And then A River Enchanted is my patron pick. And then I don't yet have my subscriber pick, the one that all of you have decided on, but I will be getting that from that other video I've mentioned a couple times. At the time I'm recording this though, I have yet to see because that other video hasn't even gone up yet. So we'll find out. I'm so excited to see what all of you recommend. I think it'll be so fun. Another anticipated release would be Compendium of Lost Tales. Many of you do not need an introduction for this, but this is the third book in the Emily Wilde series. Can't wait. I think it's going to be so much fun. And I think we're finally going to get a lot more of the very beings that Emily has been researching, and maybe a little bit more of the setting that they live within. I hope, anyway. We also have Grave Empire. This was sent to me by the publisher, and this is part of the same world as the Empire of the Wolf. I actually recently finished this trilogy, and so I'm really looking forward to jumping into this new series. And what's kind of fun is that because I waited, kind of on accident, I wanted to read it sooner, but then I ended up reading the third book in Empire of the Wolf only just recently, and now I'm going to be jumping into Grave Empire. They actually mention there being these mer creatures, like mermen, ladies, mermaids. I remember them being mentioned very briefly in the book, and I think tabbed, like, oh, I think this is what we're going to be exploring in Grave Empire, now that I've seen the synopsis for Grave Empire, and it's a little bit more on my radar. So I think it'll be really fun to go right from this finished series into this kind of branching off, doing its own thing series. And then I'll also be very interested to see how much they are related to each other. Do you have to read Empire of the Wolf, or is this a series that you could just pick up and you don't need all the context of what happens in that other trilogy? I will also be very interested to see if they reference characters from the original trilogy, especially based off of how there's a lot about, within the ending, people's reputations and what's thought of certain people. So I will be very curious to find out if that gets alluded to or touched on, or maybe even if you see certain characters. I think that'd be very interesting to find out. We also have the Fall of Neverdark, as well as Siren and Scion. Fall of Neverdark is the fourth book in the Echo Saga, and within January, the plan was to read the third book, and then in February, the plan is to read the fourth book, so I can kind of keep going with the series because it is an epic fantasy that is very, very long. There's a lot of entries to this series, so I want to kind of keep up with it. Siren and Scion is part of the Mages of the Wheel. I actually just read the second book in that series. This is the third book, so if I can, I would like to read this one. And I have to mention something that's sort of silly, but I wonder if anybody else has had this thought. This is prompted by recently replaying. Well, I don't know if it counts as a replay if it's a remaster, but I was playing through the very first Tomb Raider game. This is going somewhere relevant, I promise. And in the very first Tomb Raider game, recently they've remastered it so you can replay. It's the exact same game, except for it looks a little better. The controls are atrocious, though. Oh my gosh. But anyway, so I was replaying that, and first off, the dialogue is super funny, but second, the voice acting for some of the lines and the delivery is a lot of fun, I'll say that. But there's a character that says Scion. He says Scion every time, and I'm like, isn't it Scion? Am I incorrect? And I know I could have just looked it up before I started talking to all of you, but I forgot until I started recording. So now I'm just going to be embarrassed and admit that I always thought it was Scion, but am I wrong? Or is this one of those things where it depends on where you're from, that maybe the pronunciation's just a little bit like vitamin or aluminum, those sorts of words where depending on where you live, you actually say them differently? I don't think so. I don't think it's Scion, though. I think it's Scion. I'm going to move on from this, though.
You and that driveling piece of the Scion.
The next one, we have the Wickwire Watch. This is part of the Steampunk video, and it's also self-pub, and I think it is also a mystery. So I think it's a fantasy steampunk mystery, which sounds like a lot of fun. Got recommended multiple times. I want to also try to get around to Dark Currents. This is another self-pub book, actually. It's the sequel to Emperor's Edge. This is another series that has a lot of entries in it. I read the first one last year, and I don't want to fall too behind in keeping up with this series, as that is one of my goals, is to stay caught up with series, or at least if I started a series, try to continue on or even complete them. And then last, if possible, I'm not going to go into details because we're going to save that for when we do the Steampunk video, as well as just various different wrap-ups and things. But I have already read Soulless by Gail Carriger. And spoiler alert, I did enjoy it. So I kind of want to keep going with this series. And this one was so fun. It's so easy to just dive right back into this. This isn't one that it's like, wow, it's just like so complex and it uses so much brain power. It's not that kind of story. So it's kind of what I often say about when I dip my toes in other genres, or if I pick up different age ranges or standalones. Of course, standalones can be complex, as can other genres and age ranges. But the point is, every now and then, I'll pick up a contemporary story as a way to break up a lot of the fantasy, especially because contemporary is just something that it's very inviting, it's easy to get pulled in, you don't have all these different names and places you need to keep track of, and so it's a nice palate cleanser, essentially. But I kind of feel like this particular series, Solace, that this is one where it fulfills that a little bit, where it's just fun, but it just feels like it can fulfill what I just described about the contemporary book example I gave, except for it's still fantasy. And it's kind of like cozy fantasy might have been a better parallel there. I had a lot of fun with the first one. It was very cheeky and a good time and had so much charm and charisma. And I would like to keep going with this series if I can. But man, I have a lot on the TBR, so we'll see. But I think that could be a blast. That's it for the books that I'm planning to pick up in February. As I said, a lot of these I probably won't be talking about too soon because it'll be discussed more in depth within the Steampunk video. So if I am not talking about them right away, it doesn't mean that I haven't picked them up. It just means I'm saving it for that reading vlog. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.